Let's lock in. Bill Haney throws Jaleel Hackett under the bus to build up his son, Devin Haney. We're going to talk about this after and get into why I find this interesting and very entertaining. Here is the tweet. Bill Haney stated, Jaleel Hackett, Bernard Hackett, The Rise Podcast, Mill City, Fight Hype, Fight Hub TV, ES News, and everyone else who pushed the fake narrative about Hackett fighting Dev after Jaleel lost to a fighter ranked 134 in the world while he was ranked 140. Let Eddie Hearn, his own promoter, set the record straight. He said, sometimes you're just not good enough. That's the truth, not what people hating on Dev want you to believe. This sport isn't built on hate or hype. It's built on results. My son is already proven. He's at the top. The ring don't lie. And then he wrote, hashtag we built for this, hashtag Haney time, hashtag Team Haney. Now, what he's talking about is what Eddie Hearn said in regards to Jaleel Hackett, which a lot of people were praising Eddie Hearn for this. But to me, this is just a cover up for being a bad promoter. And I'm going to explain that, too, when I get into this video. Listen, this is what Eddie Hearn said about Jaleel Hackett.
Got beat. He's not good enough. Jaleel Hackett wants to move a little bit quicker. He boxed the pretty average Puerto Rican guy, actually put up a great fight because he completely f***ed himself at the weight, and that's, in my opinion, why he lost. And he got beat. He's not good enough. And then people respond on social media, oh, that's harsh on the fighters. Oh, you want me to lie? We say he was good enough? I can't say he was good enough because he lost. Do you know what I mean? When you're matching a prospect, 6-rounder, 6-rounder, 8-round, yeah, but once you start having 4, 5, 10-round fights, and we've invested hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars, I need to find out how good you are. And I'm not even throwing you in deep, by the way. I'm just throwing you in a level that I need you to cruise past, and you got beat. So that shows me you're either not at the level or you had a bad performance. Okay? And it's not, thanks very much, have a nice life. It's just, we need to evaluate where you are, because as a business, we can't just keep throwing hundreds and thousands of dollars at you if you're not going to go on and become world championship level. Like, we shouldn't go soft in this instance. Like, we just want to know that you're on the right path to reach world level, and not everybody is good enough, and that's the reality.
Before I get into Bill Haney, I'll address what Eddie Hearn said, which is he's not good enough. Okay. He says he's not good enough, but then tongue-in-cheek, he says he thinks that Jaleel lost the fight because of the weight cut. Now, you as a promoter, you as someone who's invested financially, and you just brought up all the money you invested in this fighter, why not tell him to move up? Right? You put him in the position where he's fighting someone who you said is mediocre, an average Puerto Rican fighter he should be able to beat, but he didn't. And you knew that the weight cut was killing him. And this was supposed to be a showcase. So why didn't you tell him to move up? And this is the issue that a lot of people have with Eddie Hearn, because if you look at the way he talked about Jaleel Hackett before the fight, he was talking about Jaleel Hackett like he's going to be the next champion. He was on pace to be the next champion, and that was the goal, and that was the plot for him. As soon as he loses a fight where some people felt like he got robbed, or loses a close fight, Eddie says he's just not good enough. Is that what you were telling him when you were investing those hundreds of thousands of dollars into him? And here's the other thing. Why are you investing hundreds and thousands of dollars into a fighter who isn't good enough? And then you say, well, at some point we want to. So let me get this straight. You invest hundreds of thousands of dollars into a project just so you can wreck it and be hundreds of thousands of dollars in the hole. And then as soon as the project suffers a setback, a single setback, you tell the world that he's just not good enough. Is that what Frank Warren did when Daniel Dubois suffered a loss to Joe Joyce? No, that's not what he did. Is that what Frank Warren did when Daniel Dubois got dropped by Lorena 3 times and had to come back to win the fight? No. He never once threw Daniel Dubois under the bus and said he wasn't good enough. He said he's learning. He's a prospect. He's young. He has potential. I'm not giving up on him. Then you saw Frank Warren giving Daniel Dubois a pep talk right before he went out there to fight Gerald Big Baby Miller, which was a great selection by Frank, especially at the time when he picked Gerald Big Baby Miller, knowing Gerald Big Baby Miller would force Daniel Dubois to have to deal with the mental aspect of the game because he was going to talk trash, and Daniel Dubois was going to have to find confidence to beat a tough guy like Gerald Miller. And then from there, matching him with Philip Hergovich. Beautiful, beautiful work by Frank Warren. When have you heard Frank Warren throw a fighter under the bus the way that Eddie Hearn did Jaleel Hackett? And you know why he threw Jaleel Hackett under the bus? To save himself, because everyone's talking about how he's such a horrible matchmaker that he needed to just throw Jaleel Hackett under the bus and say, oh, well, he's just not good enough. And if you don't like seeing this, don't watch my cards. If you believe that Eddie Hearn invested hundreds of $1,000s into Jaleel Hackett so he can throw him into a fight in Puerto Rico against a showcase so he can lose and then act like he didn't care and that you know, he just wasn't good enough, you're foolish. No one invests hundreds of thousands of dollars into anything just to see it crash and burn. And how many times does Eddie invest hundreds of thousands of dollars into a fighter just to see it crash and burn? If it keeps happening over and over again, maybe you're not a good judge of talent. So maybe you should rely on matchmaking more. Maybe you should figure out a better way. Maybe you should give your fighters more easy touches so that they can perfect their craft, so that maybe one day they can be competitive with someone who is, let's just say, contender level. Because Jaleel Hackett just lost to someone he was supposed to beat. And you invested hundreds of thousands of dollars into him, and now you want to act like, oh, he just wasn't good enough. And everyone just lets Eddie get away with saying something like that. And that really disgusts me, because the way he talked about Devin, and this is another thing that makes me laugh. You got Bill Haney talking about, you see, let Eddie Hearn tell you. He also said Devin wasn't good enough. But you don't say nothing about that, Bill, right? He also said Devin wasn't good enough when he fought Ryan. He also said Devin couldn't stop the left hook. He also said that he doesn't believe that Ryan was juicing going into their fight. He said he believes that Ryan tested positive for trace amounts of something he took during the weight cut phase of the fight. And it was contamination. He also said that, but you don't care about that, right? You just want to highlight the fact that he said Jaleel Hackett isn't good enough. And again, if Jaleel Hackett isn't good enough, how come you couldn't identify that from the beginning? Why are you investing hundreds of thousands of dollars into something you know isn't good enough? And again, why would you throw Jaleel Hackett under the bus like that? Frank Warren's never done that to his fighters. Frank Warren knows that if a good fighter can lose a fight, Frank stays by their side. Frank gives them the opportunity. Look at Frank's stable. Frank's heavyweight stable are all guys who once fought for Eddie Hearn, and as soon as they lost, Eddie just Jaleel Hackett them. Now you got Joseph Parker and Daniel Dubois about to fight co-main for the Riyadh season card in February 22nd. Two guys who were once perceived to be finished, but they were just young in their career, suffering losses that they can learn from. And this is why people look at Eddie and say he doesn't have the mind for boxing. Yeah, he can get out there and run his mouth and yap, and some people who you could sell a horrible used car to, they buy into his mess, right? But those who see through him are like, bro, like what you're doing is counterproductive. And this is where he's finding himself in a situation where a lot of guys who he used to have are now thriving elsewhere, making other promoters money and doing better than they were doing with him, because Frank Warren understood, you know what? Let me take a step back with Joseph Parker and give him a guy like Chisora who's going to test him, who's going to put him through a rough fight and force him to have to dig deep so he can find out he has that in him. Right? It's like the first time you run 5 miles, right? You never ran 5 miles before. Once you get to 3.5 miles, you're questioning yourself. You get to 4 miles. You get to 4.5, you feel like you're going to crash, but something in you has to push through to get to that 5th mile. And once you run that 5th mile, you can always run it. Well, assuming you stay active like you're supposed to, but you know in your mind. It's like the first time you bench 225, the first time you hit that mark. Once you get to that point, you know you can do it. But it's the mental. I got to lift 2 plates. Oh, man, lifting 2 plates. Then you go from lifting 2 plates to repping 2 plates. You go from repping 2 plates to put a 3rd one on. Not saying go straight to number 45, but, you know, you put a 5 on. Start putting that, put a 10 on. Then you get the rep in 3 plates. That's how it works. Okay. But Eddie doesn't let them get to the point where they know they can lift 225. Right? If you want to make the comparison, progressive overload, right? Soon as they lift 185, Eddie throws 315 on there and says, "Yeah, you lift 185. You were able to rep 185, so I think that you can. I think you can hit 315." No, you don't go from 185 to 315. How many times did you rep 185? 2 times? Oh, well, you probably want to wait till you can rep 185 5 times before you go to 200, right? It's the way you move the fighters. It's the way that you do it. To just say, "Oh, he just wasn't good enough. He just wasn't good enough." That's not what a good promoter would say. Look at the way he talked about Devin Haney before the fight. He talked about Devin Haney like he was going to be an all-time great generational talent. And look at how he talks about Devin can't even get tickets to a fight with the guy at the end of him. So this is what I'm saying on Eddie. Now let me get to Bill Haney. Bill Haney seems to be very happy that Eddie Hearn says some sly stuff about Jaleel Hackett. But like I already pointed out, he's the same one who said sly stuff about his son, and then he got mad. He pointed out how Devin couldn't stop the left hook, pointed out how he doesn't believe that Ryan Garcia took PEDs to beat Devin, believes that there was contamination and some supplement that Ryan Garcia took to lose weight just so he can make weight on the scale. Now, Bill, right? You want us to believe what Eddie Hearn says when it comes to Jaleel Hackett. Why shouldn't we believe what Eddie Hearn says when it comes to your son? And this is the same pro-black brother who gets mad when other black men say things about his son that he doesn't like. But look at how easily he tears down Jaleel Hackett. Look at how easily he tears down Javante Tank Davis. You know, look at how easily he tears down the other black fighters. But as soon as it comes to his son, that's when the whole pro-black brigade, that's when the whole Tech brigade want to come out, right? Bill Haney is the guy from he's the guy from I'm Gonna Get You Sucker, and he's the guy from Don't Be a Menace. Like my mother, it was like, is it my eyes deceive me, or I'm looking at the goddess Isis myself? Excuse me, my beautiful black sister, can you do me a favor? Tap that white woman over there for me, please. That's Bill Haney. Man, please stop it. And this is the problem. Like, everyone thinks like, "Oh, you're hating on Devin. Oh, people hate on Devin." Nah, people don't hate on Devin. It's just like, yo, they just be so phony and like fraudulent. You say you're all about like fathers empowering their son or whatever, but you would celebrate a promoter telling a young fighter he isn't good enough because he suffered one setback. I just spoke to you about 2 fighters who suffered setbacks who are now going to be fighting co-main and looking better than ever. Daniel Dubois and Joseph Parker. Joseph Parker was working with Eddie Hearn, but I guess Eddie Hearn had no use for him once he took an L, right? He probably would have. Joseph Parker's not good enough. Joseph Parker, after suffering a massive L to Joe Joyce, what did Frank Warren do? Put him in there with Derek Chisora, built him back up again, put him in there with Deontay Wilder, put him in there with Jane. Like, this is what I'm telling you. Frank Warren is a hell of a guy, hell of a promoter. Frank Warren shows you how it's done. Frank Warren actually does this like he had to earn it. Like, he had to come from the mud. Like, he had to learn the ins and outs of the game. You know, when you want to run a company sometimes, I think Kenny the Jet Smith was talking about this. Like, he said he went to college with someone. I think it was like the carrier. No, like a guy whose dad had like I think it was like Kohl's or something like that. It was the guy who owns like a company where they make like toilets and all these plumbing accessories and things of that nature. And he said his college roommate told him that his dad made him work as a plumber. Like, he had to start as a plumber before he could even be qualified to inherit the business. He said what his dad said was like, you got to know the ins and outs of this. You got to know what it's like to fix a toilet in order for you to be the CEO of my company. You have to know what it's like to start from the bottom, right? Frank operates that way. See, Frank knows that one loss doesn't define a fighter. He knows it's what's in here. He knew Daniel Dubois. He knew Daniel Dubois had it in him. He knew Joseph Parker. He knew Joseph Parker had it in him. Frank Warren never sat there and said, these guys aren't good enough. And for Bill Haney to sit there and be clapping about that. Well, I'm going to let Eddie Hearn tell you. Well, why don't you play what Eddie Hearn said about your son then too? How he's a bad business investment. How he's not a draw. How he's entitled. Why don't you play that too, Bill? That's why people come at y'all the way you do. Because you're two-faced, you're phony, and you're hypocrites. That's why people stopped liking Devin Haney. I was someone who used to like Devin Haney, but I started to see the hypocrisy in everything that he does. And now I'm like, yo, this dude lost me when he went to actually really go sue Ryan Garcia for battery, which they're saying that they never showed up in court and they're not, but you definitely filed the paperwork. Devin Haney and Drake gave light-skinned brothers the biggest setback we've had since G Money married the pipe. And that's real talk. Anyways, let me know what you think in the comment section. Like, share, subscribe. It's Caden. I'm out. Peace.